Alright gamers, it's a new year, so it's time to talk about everything that I played in the last year, in 2025. I have my pile of games right here, as I always do. I think this is the third year in a row that I've been doing it, and I'm gonna talk about those games. Each and every one of them, a bit more than those, because I played some digital games. This year, I'm also gonna put them in a tier list, so let's not waste any more time, because there are a lot of games to talk about. 2025 was a fantastic year for games, both new releases, but also old releases. So I'm actually really excited to talk about some of these. Some of them are a bit less exciting, but I'm gonna talk about all of them, just to have my gaming journey of 2025. If you like videos like this, be sure to leave a subscribe, leave a like on the video, comment something in the comments what your favorite game was that you played in 2025, but let's get to it. And the first game that I played in 2025 was Hidden Agenda. This is one of those movie decision-making games. It was kind of a tradition for a couple of years where I got together with some friends to play through one of these games on New Year's Eve, especially the ones that encourage multiplayer like The Quarry, which we played in 2024, and now in 2025 it was time for Hidden Agenda. This is a murder mystery detective game, and it works with a mobile app where you have to make the choices, and as the story progresses, everyone also gets a personalized objective on their app for certain scenes. This can go from small stuff like make sure you investigate the kitchen, to bigger stuff like make sure the killer escapes this encounter. This makes the game pretty unique and fun, but this is also the thing that made it kind of annoying, as some players were prioritizing the flow of the narrative, while others were just working towards their agenda. Some of us also realized partway through that the narrative wasn't that strong anyway, so we might as well just mess around with each other to get the agenda done. So all in all, this was a pretty fun game to just play in a group for a night of fun, but this isn't like Dispatch or The Quarry or Until Dawn, where I genuinely recommend playing the game for the game itself. So while it might be a bit harsh, I think I am just gonna put Hidden Agenda in the C tier, just because I don't really recommend playing it unless you just want to have a night of fun with some friends. And the second game that I played in 2025 was the first Ace Attorney Investigations game. This is a pretty fun Ace Attorney game, but it sadly doesn't have that much to make it stand out, at least story-wise, because in terms of gameplay, this is the most unique Ace Attorney game so far, being the first of the investigation spin-off series. In these games, you play as Edgeworth, who is investigating the crime scenes, collecting evidence, and questioning witnesses. The witnesses part keeps the same format as it does in the mainline titles, but the investigations are way more in-depth and have a bunch of new mechanics, which is pretty fun. Gameplay obviously isn't really the main draw of an Ace Attorney game. They're always fun and they make it satisfying to piece a story together, but that story is why you're here. But sadly, it is kind of weak in this entry. It's cool that every case is building towards a single larger plot, as almost every single culprit and victim is connected, but that plot just wasn't that interesting in my opinion. It has some good moments and some cool ideas, but not enough to carry the entire game. And because of that, a lot of the cases ended up being quite lackluster, and now looking back at the game, it also wasn't that memorable. But I also want to make clear that it's not a straight up bad game. The major characters, for example, are great as always. Despite only being a supporting character in every other game, Edgeworth flawlessly takes the role of the protagonist here. Gumshoe also plays a major role in this title, so that already makes it better than most games out there, and it was also really cool to have so many returning faces from the original trilogy. Those games always felt super down to earth and closely connected through returning characters like this, an element that was kind of missing from the Apollo trilogy. Of course, the new characters are also a welcome addition to this cast, even if it took me some time to grow to like them. Kai was chill from the beginning, but I didn't really vibe with Lang until like basically the final chapter. I guess it's just that this game is consistently okay to good. It's consistently 7 out of 10, which is far from bad, but that does make it hard for it to stand out in a series with this many entries. It's very important to play it though, because Investigations 2 is a direct sequel, and that one might be my favorite Ace Attorney game. But I played that one later in the year, so I'll get back to that. As for the tier list, I guess I'll give this one a low B, just middle of the road. It's a fine game, it's an okay game, but again, it doesn't really have anything to make it stand out, to make it go to A or S tier like I would put most Ace Attorney games, so middle of the road, B tier. And after that, I played a game that I didn't really expect to play at all. Sonic X Shadow Generations. I only kind of played this because I got swept into the movie hype, like probably a lot of people did. The first two were okay, but the third one was actually really good. So when I saw they were releasing this game, I just really wanted to give it a try, play a Sonic game, because I never really played a Sonic game before. Shadow is pretty cool. We gotta start off with Sonic Generations though, because this game is actually a collection, including a remaster of Sonic Generations and a new tie-in game called Shadow Generations. And as for Sonic, I am a bit mixed on this one. Some levels are really good, like Escape from the City and Speed Highway, but others are just fine or pretty good, and then you have some that are absolute dog shit, like Crisis City and Planet Wisp. The challenge levels are also pretty cool, but since they all take place in the main stages, these do get pretty repetitive, and most of the boss fights are also kind of bad. Overall, I did enjoy the game though. It's not like I actively disliked it or anything. The gameplay systems themselves were quite fun, and my issues are more with the level design. The story was nothing though. It was charming to have both classic and modern Sonic, and I really like that classic Sonic can't talk, because that's just a fun detail, but that's literally it. But that does bring me to Shadow Generations, and this game really surprised me, because while I enjoyed Sonic Generations, I really liked and honestly kind of loved Shadow Generations. The movement was extremely fluid and satisfying. It was a massive upgrade. The level design was also really fun, and it relied a lot more on reflexes rather than memorizing the stages. This is also helped by Shadow's different abilities that shake up the gameplay and keep the game interesting while differentiating Shadow from Sonic. These abilities also work especially well in the hub area, as they're used to segment and pace the content that you can access. I also really like how this hub is designed. As a small side note, keeping the visual style of Sonic Generations but putting it in a 3D space made the hub itself feel like a level rather than just a fancy mission select screen. I do wish we had one or two more stages though. I get that this was a smaller tie-in game to go with the movie hype in the remaster, but with a movement system this fun, I just wanted more of it. Even the story in this game was pretty good, using the time travel mechanics of Generations to give Shadow some proper development was really cool, and a much better idea than just, oh hey Sonic from the past, it's me Sonic from today, isn't that crazy? I really hope the series can keep up this quality going forward, because I really enjoyed this game, and if all of the games are this good, I would love to play some more of them. In terms of the tier list, I'm actually gonna give Shadow Generations an A tier for that reason, and Sonic Generations, I think I'm gonna give a high C tier, because, I don't know, it just feels right. And after that, I played a game that I don't have physically. It's a game that I bought on the Steam sale like years ago for like 2-3 euros maybe, and I never actually expected to play it until I just randomly felt like starting it in late 2024, and then I finished it in early 2025. I'm talking about The Witcher 1 Enhanced Edition. This game didn't age perfectly, and it can be pretty janky at times. The presentation is rough and the controls aren't the best. But despite all of that, I'm actually really happy that I stuck with it and reached the ending, because despite its jank, it was just a really interesting game to play through. The narrative constantly forces you to take sides, decide between life and death, influence other characters, etc. And these choices can impact your game in pretty major ways. Sometimes in the short term, but at other times you won't see the result until like 10 to 20 hours later, which really impressed me. In many ways, this game is extremely ambitious, but while all of those amazing elements are there, the execution of all of it can sometimes be quite lacking. A lot of important narrative scenes are hidden away in side quests which are easily missed, which makes the side quests important, and it's really nice if you find them out of nowhere. If you just blindly run into a side quest and it has this deep importance to the narrative and the characters, it is a fantastic feeling. But on the other hand, if you miss those side quests, it's gonna make the story feel confusing and disconnected. And in terms of the gameplay, you are gonna be spending the majority of your playtime just walking from point A to point B, doing menial fetch quests and talking to NPCs. This game also has a very small amount of different NPC character models, which sounds like a really strange criticism, but during this game you will be talking to what feels like the same person over and over again, despite some of them being completely different characters and actually having some plot relevance. Most of these points are understandable though, because it is an older game with a smaller budget, but it's still something that hinders the experience. The Witcher 1 is just a bit of a weird game, because it creates some incredible and memorable moments. It has so much heart, and it has a really interesting story, a deep world, and nuanced characters. You can feel that the creators wanted to make something special, but that's only when everything lines up perfectly, because at other times the pacing can drag. It's pretty buggy, and at worst it really feels like the game is crumbling under its own ambition. I don't remember the exact reason why, but I tried getting into The Witcher 3 a few times and I always ended up dropping it a couple of hours in. But now I'm glad that I finally actually finished my first step into this series. At first I wasn't sure if these games were even for me, but now I am very excited to see how this series evolved. I feel like it would be about right to give it maybe a high B tier. It might be a more flawed game than Investigations, but it definitely stood out to me more. And the next game is a game that I'm gonna go over a bit faster. It's Fantasian NEO Dimension. I'm not gonna go over it faster because it's a bad game or anything like that. It's actually pretty good, but I already have a video on it on my channel because Square Enix was nice enough to give me a review code for it. So thank you so much, Square Enix. I just bought the game physically because this is actually a port of a mobile game, and I really want to support releases like this, especially from Square Enix, because God knows they have some banger mobile games that are just trapped on mobile. Even if this wasn't originally a Square Enix game. This is one of the newer titles from the original creator behind Final Fantasy. I would recommend checking it out because if you like JRPGs, you will most likely be into Fantasian NEO Dimension. This is a great game and has some incredible music, a really fun and unique combat system, a gorgeous world and art style, great characters, and a really interesting story. It was just a bit too grindy for my taste, but I'll leave my review for it linked in the description. And in terms of the tier list, I'm gonna put it in a high B, because it does a lot of really great things that I really like about it, and it was a really fun experience, but at the same time, again, there are some flaws with it that kind of stopped me from putting it even higher. Looking at this tier list now, it looks like it was a pretty middling year, but trust me, I have some bangers coming up, alright? Just let me cook. Talking about bangers, the next one is actually a really good one, because in early 2025 it was finally time to continue my playthrough of the Metal Gear Solid games. My last video, if you remember, I talked about the Metal Gear games and 1 and 2, so of course this year it was time for Snake Eater. Not the remake, but the Master Collection version, which is actually pretty solid. It's a good way to play this game, because this was genuinely a legendary game. The story was filled with twists, and they constantly recontextualized the narrative up until the post-credit scene, which makes me really excited to eventually replay the game one day with the added context. Every major character was also explored in really interesting ways. Doesn't matter if it's the goofy Cobra unit or the driving forces behind the plot, like the boss, Ocelot, or Snake. Each and every one of them is memorable and have their role to play. I didn't really expect to be this interested in them or to be this attached to some of these characters, considering the shorter runtime of this game, but I fell in love with every single character, and it led to a gut punch of an ending. The gameplay is also really fun and engaging. The jungle setting just added so much to the gameplay. New ways to approach an encounter, all of the new survival and disguise mechanics, it all just struck a perfect balance of having the setting and narrative impact the gameplay without it feeling tedious and annoying, all the while still providing that core stealth experience that these games are known for. The jungle itself is also a fantastic setting with visuals that hold up incredibly well and a perfect atmosphere, which is also thanks to the impeccable sound design with all of the noises of the wildlife and the rustling of the grass. A prequel story is not at all what I expected after Metal Gear Solid 2, and I wasn't even sure if I would be into it, but I ended up adoring my time with this game. It is such a masterfully crafted experience from beginning to end. I kind of don't even know why they decided to remake this game. It genuinely holds up perfectly. And I would also give it bonus points for the song Snake Eater alone, as I still listen to it almost daily, but the game is already a 10 out of 10, so what are bonus points gonna do? Obviously, this game is S tier. It's peak. Absolute cinema. Continuing on to the next masterpiece on the list. Absolute banger. Once again, back-to-back masterpieces here in this video. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. This was actually a replay, because I already played the original, and I am very curious how many people clicked off this video when I called The Last of Us Part 2 a masterpiece. But hear me out for a second. While it definitely has a number of flaws, The Last of Us Part 2 delivers some real emotional hits that not many games have the power to achieve. Especially now, replaying it years after the original release. After the dust has mostly settled, taking a step back from all of the online discourse, I just really enjoyed revisiting this game and Ellie's journey. The game does a fantastic job at showing what she is going through, what she is making herself go through, and how it is affecting her and everyone around her. But Ellie is only one side of the story, as we also get our new protagonist, Abby. And while her journey has a lot to love, this is where the game does start to show some flaws for me. Abby herself is great, especially thanks to her connection with Lev and Yara, but the rest of her companions aren't as strong. I don't think they're bad characters, their relationship with Abby is interesting and it really serves her arc, but that's kind of it. I don't really care for them, or I didn't really connect with them in the same way that I cared for Ellie's companions. The pacing can also drag at some points during her section, but with that being said, I really like how the game uses both of these stories and how it culminates them in the finale. The gameplay itself is also absolutely stellar. This is probably the most fun that I've ever had in a third-person shooter. I played on the hard difficulty and every single encounter felt extremely tense and rewarding. The level design is immaculate, the enemy AI forced me to change my approach, flowing from stealth into combat, back into stealth, all felt super smooth and natural. It's simple in a lot of ways, but it was so damn effective. I definitely have my problems with The Last of Us 2, but this entire journey was an emotional ride like nothing else. This game leaves you feeling emotionally drained, and I mean that in the best way possible. I understand why this game is controversial. It takes a lot of extremely risky decisions, and some people will not like the direction that it took. But as it usually happens with very risky decisions, while a lot of people will dislike it, there are just as many people that feel very, very strongly in the complete opposite direction. And I am just one of the people that feel really strongly about it in the positive sense, even if it does have its fair share of flaws. And because of that, I will actually put it in S tier. There aren't a lot of stories that have hit me in the same way that The Last of Us 2 hit me. And, as I have been saying, it really is one masterpiece after the next, because up next I played a game that I don't have physically, but it is Devil Survivor Overclocked. This is also a game that I'm gonna go over a bit faster, as I have a video out for it on my channel, and it's probably one of my favorite videos that I made in 2025. But this game is just so good. It consistently blew me away. This is peak Shin Megami Tensei for me. I adore this game. I really like the combat system, I love all of the characters, I love the decision making that makes it feel like you're slowly shaping this narrative. I love the atmosphere, I loved uncovering the mysteries behind the plot, I loved meeting all of the side characters, I adore the OST. God, I could yap about this game forever, but I have a video on it, so I am just gonna move on. I'm obviously putting it in S tier. Lower S tier because it is a bit aged. I wouldn't call it janky, it's definitely a bit aged, and the game was also a bit grindy with some weird difficulty jumps, but still a fantastic game. Peak Shin Megami Tensei. If you've never heard of it, definitely check out my video or just check out the game. You won't regret it. And next on the list is another game that I don't have physically. Kinda sad that we're doing so many digital-only games back to back, but I played Katamari Damacy Reroll. And this is another quick one, not because I made a video on it or anything, because I didn't, but because it's Katamari. This is the game where you roll things into a ball and the ball just gets bigger and bigger until you start rolling up mountains and entire countries. You would be really surprised how fun it is to just roll things into a ball. For real though, most of the stages were really strong. There was only one objective type that I didn't really like, and the music was an absolute vibe. For some reason, the game would make me feel kind of motion sick though, so I hope that the second game won't have that effect, because I am definitely playing the second game. This game was just a bunch of fun, kind of dumb fun, but I'd still give it an A rank. It's probably gonna stay at the lower end of A rank, but it's fun, very cool game. We're balling, I guess. Next game, I think. Yes, the next game is Monster Hunter Wilds, and this is an interesting one, because I wasn't actually sure if I was gonna include it in this video or not. For the simple reason that I dropped this game after 8 to 10 hours. But I thought, why not just rant about all of the stuff that bothered me about this game and tell you guys why I dropped it. I tried getting into the series a few times now, with World Rise and now this, and while this is probably the one that I enjoyed the most, I'm just still not feeling it. Especially with this game, it was really annoying that they forced this bland story upon you. I boot up this game to hunt monsters, but nope, it's time for an unskippable follow this NPC and listen to dialogue section. And while I do like the story for the really cool monster encounters, the majority of the cutscenes in this game are just generic characters doing info dumps. The open world in this one was also kind of disappointing, and I hate how a lot of the exploration is on rails. You just get on your mount and the game auto drives you to your destination. You can control your mount yourself, but a lot of the pathways don't really make sense, and when you're in a climbing animation, the game is locking you into that animation anyway, so there isn't that much freedom of exploration or traversal anyway. This was especially annoying during story set pieces where the game actively punishes you for wanting to interact with the spectacle. Everyone does always say that Monster Hunter only starts when you reach the credits, but then why is the story of this game such a slog? It doesn't even serve as a good tutorial, as the game doesn't explain any of the major game mechanics to you. I really wish that the story was just a few hunts to explain how the game works before unleashing you into the world. I know that most of these issues are only present during the story, or some of them even only during Monster Hunter Wilds, so that's not the whole reason that I'm dropping it. I just wasn't really enjoying the general gameplay loop, the combat, and the hunts. I tried a lot of different weapons, but a lot of hunts just went on forever and ever, as you're just hitting away at this massive monster, sometimes pressing R1 for a special animation, sometimes it runs away so you can chase after it on your on-rails mounted section, and then at some point the monster will just fall over. You craft a piece of armor, you choose the next monster, and you repeat. This is just a matter of the game not clicking with me personally. I can definitely see why people would love these games, but during my time with the game I did 10 hunts and I only kind of enjoyed one of them. Most of my playtime I just felt like I was wasting my time pushing through it in the hopes that I might enjoy it more after the next hunt. But there are other games that I want to play out there that I know that I'll enjoy more, so it's not something that I wanted to put more time into. It's okay to drop games sometimes. I feel like a lot of Monster Hunter fans might hate me for that, but you know, sometimes that's just how it is, isn't it? I'm just gonna make a note here there for games that I dropped. It just wasn't for me. Up next we have another game that I'm gonna go over quickly because it is Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. I really enjoyed this game, but just like with Fantasian, I already have a video on it up on my channel. I also got a review code for this one, so massive thanks to Koei Tecmo for that. This is one of those series that I wanted to get into for quite a while, and this remaster was just the perfect opportunity. All in all, it was just a really strong action game. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a bunch of fun, really fun combat system, a lot of fun combos, really liked how diverse all of the environments were as well, so for that reason I'm gonna put it in the middle of A tier. It's a lot of fun, but it's also just an action game, not like the story was blowing me away or anything. But yeah, not too much to say about it, putting it in the middle of a very, very fun game. And after that, I played another digital-only game, Death Come True, a game that I feel like no one's ever heard of, because I didn't even hear of it until pretty recently. And the only reason that I heard of this game, and the only reason that I played it, is because it was made by Kodaka, a game creator that has basically become my god at this point. I will definitely be talking about him later in the video again, but this is basically a live-action movie with some branching paths. And it was pretty good. It wasn't mind-blowing, it wasn't fantastic, but it also wasn't bad. It has an intriguing story, a solid mystery to solve, and a very satisfying twist near the end. It wasn't anything special, as I said, just a bit of fun. I think I'm gonna put it at like lower B-ish, because again, was really fun for one night, but it's not like a must play, it's not like I highly recommend it, just like, yeah, if you want to check it out, it's there. If you like Kodaka's other games, I feel like you'll enjoy this one. This actually makes me sad, because I thought I had this game physically, but it's the only Resident Evil game that I don't have yet, and I should really pick it up, because it goes for really cheap nowadays. But the next game that I finished in 2025 was Resident Evil Revelations 2. This is the first of 3 Resident Evil games in this video, and this game is just the definition of, it's alright, I guess. It has some cool ideas and story beats, and it has a couple of heartwarming character moments. The gameplay is also pretty fun, but the puzzles are just okay. The level design is just okay. The execution of the cool story ideas is just okay. It's in no way a bad game, but it's just mediocre. It's just fine, and it doesn't really stand out in any way. But that does make me kinda sad, especially when you look at it in the context of Resident Evil, the legendary horror franchise. It's far from the worst game, but these games should aim for a lot more than this. It really sucks that there's no real horror atmosphere. The only real horror comes from, look, there are zombies, and look, there's blood on the walls. I also really dislike how the co-op is handled. For some reason, it's only local co-op, and the second player can only lockpick, shine a flashlight, or point their finger at the enemy to make them visible, because some of them are like a weird invisible monster, but then player 2 has to point at them, so player 1 can shoot them, which makes players 2 POV really boring to play through, and my co-op partner actually dropped out midway through the game because they were just extremely bored. So I played through the rest of the game in single player, which wasn't much better because now I was constantly forced to switch between characters, which is very tedious and it never really felt quite right. It was quite disorienting. It was just a mess. The game in general is definitely better than Revelations 1 because of the better gunplay, and it does have a better story. Plus it has Barry and Claire, which is cool, but it's still a pretty uninspired title. It often made me think back on older Resident Evil games, like Resident Evil 1, giving me thoughts like, damn man, Resident Evil used to be so great, what happened? I don't know why this is the game that gave me those thoughts. As I said, there are definitely far worse Resident Evil games out there, but maybe I was just getting tired after playing 5, Revelations 1, and now Revelations 2 back to back, and god knows it wasn't gonna get much better with Resident Evil 6 on the horizon. I don't want to be too harsh on it, because as I said, it does have a bunch of cool ideas, and it does have a decently fun gameplay loop, and it has those great moments, but it's just kind of unremarkable, I guess, so it goes in the middle of beats here. The absolute just middle of the road. It's alright, I guess. Okay, I just looked at my list. We're back to peak, guys. I'm gonna grab the game from this side because it is time for the second game in the Ace Attorney Investigations collection. And after the okay game, that was the first title, I think that the sequel might actually be the best game in the series so far. I haven't played the Great Ace Attorney yet, but this game just perfectly encapsulates all of what Ace Attorney strives to be. Edgeworth's arc continues here, and despite the fact that he's a focus in many titles, this game felt extremely meaningful in his development. There were so many moments in this game that cemented him as my #1 favorite Ace Attorney character. A big part of his arc is the connection to his past and his father, which is both explored through flashback chapters, but also through some new characters, one of them being Eddie Fender. This is a character so infectiously charming that you can't help but fall in love with him the second he enters the story, and he keeps stealing every single scene he's in. Kai from the first game is also back here to fill her role as the sidekick, and while I did like her in the first game, this game elevated her to be one of my favorite sidekicks. And then you have Eustace, who you'll probably hate at first, but throughout his arcs he becomes another highlight in the story. The fact that they can make you care about this guy is already really telling of how good this game is. And just like with the first game, I also do like how interconnected every single chapter or case is. But this game takes that concept from the first one and takes it even further. Every chapter and every key figure in each chapter was important all the way through. All of these characters are not just one-dimensional cardboards that show up to do one job in one chapter before leaving forever. No, all of them leave a lasting impact. Everything in this game is also building off of the foundation of the story of the first game, so while that one was often too exposition heavy, causing it to drag, this story can just go straight to the interesting stuff. It literally improved on the original in every single way. The gameplay is better with new and improved mechanics, the story is better paced, it's a lot more memorable, the characters are way more interesting, it uses the context of the first game and the rest of the franchise in brilliant ways. I genuinely just can't praise this game enough. It might have a completely different structure than the main games, but at its core, with the characters, the themes, and the storytelling, this is Ace Attorney perfected. So in terms of the tier list, I feel like it should come at no surprise that this is indeed an S tier game. I'm thinking if I like it more than Metal Gear Solid or not. I feel like that kind of depends on the day, but now that I just talked about both of them, and being a really big Ace Attorney fan, I think I like this one more than Metal Gear Solid 3. But again, this can kind of depend on the day. They're both fantastic games, and comparing them is really hard. One of them is fucking visual novel detective game, and the other one is a tactical espionage third-person shooter. I'll put it there, looks nice, on to the next game. And the next game is Grand Theft Auto Vice City. And seeing the game here like this kind of just reminds me of why I really like recording this video every year, because just holding this game, I can remember what I was doing while I was playing it. I just remember being sick in bed and binging this game. Like, I was laying in bed, sleeping most of the time, you know how it is when you're sick, but at every waking moment I would boot up my PlayStation Portal so I didn't have to leave the bed, and I would just drive through Vice City and play through the story. In a lot of ways, this game does really show its age. It's a pretty simple game with how the wanted level works, how you make money, your equipment and traversal options, but it was just really interesting to see how they tried to get the most out of these simple mechanics. It was really fun to drive around the city, find little secrets, partake in the side activities, or play through the main story. Rockstar also did a great job at making the city feel huge, even if it is quite small in reality. Vice City in general is just a really fun setting, and I am excited to see it again in GTA 6, which is mostly the reason why I played this. It is also kinda sad that this remaster didn't really bother to do more than the bare minimum. As we all know, this game was a travesty at launch, but after all of the updates, I would say that it is worth playing. It's definitely not a mind-blowing experience to play in today's day and age, but if you enjoy GTA and you don't mind some janky controls and missions, I would recommend it. Sometimes it's just fun to see where these massive franchises came from and how they evolved over the years. In terms of the tier list, I don't really know where I'd put it, because it is pretty fun, also kinda aged, also kinda janky. I'm gonna give it a B tier. It's a higher B tier. Actually no, I think I'm gonna put it below Revelation. I know I was very positive about it, and B tier is not a bad tier, and I'd probably talk more negative about Revelations, but I think I like Revelations a tiny bit more. Oh god. I just looked at the next game. Chat, it's time for Resident Evil 6. I was just saying how none of the games in my tier list are like bad games just now. This is the first like genuinely bad game, I would say. Yeah. Where do I even begin with this one? Like, this game is really hard to review, both because of the way that it's structured, but also because it's just a mess. There are 4 different campaigns. Each campaign conveys a different POV from the same overarching narrative, but within each campaign, all of them are also following their own standalone story. These stories just kind of converge at key moments as they are part of this larger whole. These campaigns can vary in quality a lot. The best one is, I guess it's okay, and the worst one, let's just say it's not, it's not okay. The new characters often feel like the writers did not know what they wanted to do with them. They either feel like an afterthought, and calling them characters is honestly a stretch in those cases, or their development feels really awkward as the game keeps jumping from point to point without properly establishing an arc for them. Even the returning characters are pretty weak here, which just saddens me to say that, because after playing so many Resident Evil games, I really like these guys, but they're just not very good here. They often just act out of character simply so they can fill the role that the story needs them to fill at whatever given time, and just like the new characters, a lot of their arcs just don't make sense as they're just jumping to conclusions, and it feels like we're just skipping through their arcs in a wrong order, and it also doesn't feel like it's the proper arc for these characters in a lot of cases. And because there are 4 different campaigns showing different POVs of the same story, you will also spend a lot of time rewatching cutscenes, going through the same levels, and just witnessing the same events. There are some moments where these POVs really work and where it offers a new perspective or an interesting way to reveal plot points, but most of the time it works actively against the game. At points it even breaks its own continuity. A lot of reveals come out of nowhere, it makes a lot of really big moments lose their impact, and it's just a slog to play through. Add to that this is the longest Resident Evil game by quite a bit, but nothing here justifies that length. There are a few good moments hidden away in this game, but there is just so much nonsense in between. Every chapter contains at least one point where it felt like we should move on, where it felt like a chapter should end, only for the chapter to continue with another 20 minutes of filler nothingness. Shout out to the finale of the Chris campaign though, because that was the best part of the game, and actually quite good. For as much shit that I give this game, I do like where Resident Evil 6 leaves Chris and how it handled the end of his campaign. But since we're highlighting specific campaigns, I also want to highlight Ada's campaign for being absolute dog shit. And while I am talking about the campaigns, to give a positive every once in a while, I do like that all of the different characters actually play differently. They all have different guns and different loadouts, and each campaign also has a really distinct vibe, and they even have unique UI designs, which is really cool. But that then brings us to the gameplay, which is not very good. I honestly have no idea how they were able to take the third-person shooter mechanics from Resident Evil 5, a flawed but still enjoyable game, and just make them worse in every single way. The cover system, if you can even call it that, barely works. Enemies constantly stun you, causing you to lose control of your character for way too long. The camera angle makes shooting and honestly even moving around a mess, especially when sprinting. The skills and upgrades and inventory systems and all of that only offer a fraction of the depth that earlier titles gave us, and on top of all of that, there are so many small annoyances in this game that just make this entire experience a pain. It is almost like they didn't even finish development. You get stun locked all the time, a lot of environments feel unfit for the amount or type of enemies that you're fighting. Revival animations are a mess, they don't have iframes, so your characters will just die while your partner is picking you up, causing the entire game to just glitch out for a bit. There is no shared loot in co-op, and there's no way to hand your partner loot, a system that was in Resident Evil 5 and worked incredibly well. There are way too many quicktime events or on-rail shooter segments or temple run sections that keep interrupting the flow of the action. Most of the combat encounters feel like filler. As the story progresses, you will also fight the same bosses over and over and over again, because they genuinely will just not die no matter what you do to them. And I think the game has a parry system, but I only got the pop-up for it once or twice in my 25-hour playtime, and the quicktime event was only there for like a fraction of a second, so I'm honestly not even sure if the parry system is real or not. I could go on, believe me, I could, but I feel like you get the point. It's a shame that this game turned out this way, because obviously they had a lot of cool story ideas. This was the game where Leon and Chris finally met on screen, but guess what? For some reason, they made them meet off screen. It was weird. This game, it could have been good. It had so much potential. Having Jake as a character, having Sherry back, having Chris and Leon. There are so many moving pieces here that have potential for each and every character involved, but they fumble it in almost every single way with few exceptions. The co-op is honestly the only real saving grace here, because even if it is a downgrade from the Resi 5 co-op, suffering together is always more fun than suffering alone. And that being said, it is an upgrade from the Revelations 2 co-op system, because at least in this game both players can engage in co-op. This is a D tier, easily, but a D tier feels kind of too nice for it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a row below D tier, and I'm gonna call it to Resident Evil 6 tier, because I did not like this game. I feel like maybe I went a bit hard on the game. But it was just a fun rant. Don't take it personally, Resident Evil 6 fans. I was gonna say the game is okay, but I don't know if I can do that. It's fine, it's fine. It's Resident Evil. Ah, don't we all love Resident Evil? Yeah. Next up, though, we got Pokemon. I'm holding white, but I played black. I'm holding white because this is the one my girlfriend plays, and she really wanted a physical copy of it, and Pokemon games are really expensive to get physically, so I'm not buying two of the same gen. But I played Pokemon Black this year. So this one is close enough in my opinion. And this was a pretty good Pokemon game. I really liked the visual style, especially when they get creative with the camera angles, and I really liked the enemy team and the rivals. Having one rival for the training and battle side of things, and one rival for the research side is a really cool idea, and it actually makes them stand out a lot more compared to the rivals from the other Pokemon games that I played. But besides that, it did also feel like a pretty standard Pokemon game, with all of the positives and negatives that come with it. I also play these games very casually. I'm not really looking to min-max my build or to complete the Pokédex. I'm just here for the ride. The basic formula is always quite strong, but a majority of my playthrough here did kind of feel like it's fun, but I feel like I've kinda been there, done that. Until I reached the finale at least, because everything from the final few hours of this game was absolutely perfect. The music was going extremely hard, the battles had the perfect level of challenge, there was a fun twist to shake up the formula around the champion battle, the Team Plasma stuff, and the whole plot of N and Reshiram was awesome to see unfold. This entire ending finale section was peak Pokemon, but all in all, while it is a great Pokemon game and while it does have a perfect conclusion, there are some other entries in the series that I enjoyed quite a bit more as a full package, but this one definitely gave me quite a few memorable characters and moments, so ultimately I am happy that I played it. I'm excited to play Black 2 at some point. So I think I'm gonna put it like in the higher B tier, because as I was saying, it's a Pokemon game, it's a good Pokemon game, but it's not like mind-blowing or anything. It was a fun time. I'm thinking of putting it higher in B tier, but nah, I feel like this is fine. It's not that deep. And next up, we have another Kojima masterpiece. Death Stranding 2 on the beach. This game is bigger and bolder than the first game in almost every single way. The story is a lot more active throughout, the combat has been expanded upon, there are more vehicles, more BT types, the world is bigger, and there is a lot more variety in the landscapes. But because of some of these additions, I actually found myself having some doubts about this title in the earlier hours. There were a few times where I missed the lonely journeys of Death Stranding 1, where that game would mercilessly put me in front of a mountain with nothing more than a ladder and a climbing rope, while in this game the landscape is a lot more forgiving and you usually have a bunch more options. While part of me still kind of misses that challenging and arduous experience of the original, throughout the game my mindset changed a bit, because different doesn't mean worse. As I played more, I really grew to appreciate Death Stranding 2 for what this experience is and for what this game specifically is trying to be. This isn't a retread of Death Stranding 1, instead it feels like an evolution. They don't reset your progress after that first journey, instead they expand on that endgame kit. The world is also designed with this in mind, and it is quite a bit bigger, pushing you to use the new systems like the monorails and the upgraded roads, the new vehicles and all of the other mechanics. I'll always remember my long drives across the wastelands of Australia, with a beautiful sunset happening in perfect sync with this incredible OST, or the times that I was scaling the mountaintops to climb above the clouds only to look out towards a breathtaking view. Just like the first game, this can genuinely be a transcendent experience, where everything just hits. Shifting gears, the combat is a lot more fun and thrilling. I also really liked experimenting with all of the different options, and the stealth was incredibly satisfying. The BT boss fights also no longer feel like an awkward encounter where the difficulty originated from the controls. It's still a bit awkward, as it should be since you're still a guy with 20 pieces of cargo on his back, but it is so much more responsive and fun once you find your way around that. Some of the boss battles in this game were genuinely spectacular, and I'm gonna remember a lot of them for a very long time. And all of this isn't even mentioning the main draw of this game and the best part of this entire package, the story. Death Stranding 2 is a deeply personal tale that's gonna stick with me for a very long time. It's a story about connection, isolation, grief, and death, and it explores all of these themes wonderfully through a fantastic cast of characters. I really love the crew of the DHV Magellan and how everyone's individual story comes together to create this found family family, with all of them in turn connecting to the greater narrative. A narrative that shines in both its loud and its quiet moments. It's filled with goofy Kojima-isms, but it knows when to take itself seriously, and when it does, it delivers a deeply thought-provoking story, deeply rooted in its emotional core, with some of the best action scenes and set pieces that I have ever experienced in a game. Pair all of this with masterful performances and music, and it elevates every moment. My main issue with this game really is just the missing challenge of that gameplay. I played through it on the hardest difficulty, but outside of some optional endgame deliveries, it just left me wanting more. Maybe if some sections of the map were designed to be a bit more challenging, maybe by forcing you to leave your vehicle behind a bit more often, it could have incorporated some more of that Death Stranding 1 flavor that I was missing at some point. But at the end of my journey, I spent close to 120 hours to get the platinum on this game, and if I'm being honest, I genuinely miss playing it. It is truly a masterful piece of art and one of my favorite experiences that I have ever played. I didn't talk about it before on the channel because it's a bit of a different game than the stuff that I usually talk about, and somehow there was another title released in 2025 that surpassed this for me, but it cannot be understated how much I love Death Stranding 2. This game was very close to being my game of the year. It was very close to being the best game that I played all year, and the time that I spent on this game will always be something special to me. So I feel like it's without a doubt, I feel like it's natural that I put this at the top of S tier. Absolute masterpiece. Moving on to the next game. Expedition 33, which is pretty good. Moving on. That was obviously a joke. Don't send the Expedition Army after me, please. Personally, I wouldn't give this game a 10 out of 10, but it is safe to say that it is indeed a fantastic game and a massive achievement for the team that worked on it. The combat is just a lot of fun. It offers a lot of build customization, and it's a nice mix of turn-based and action combat. I really like how the parry system allows you to get out of a tight spot, but I also really love how a strong character build can be there as a backup for when you do miss that parry. But when mixing two systems that are so fundamentally different, of course there will always be some shortcomings for some people, and I wasn't really a fan of how the enemy movesets evolved as you progress the game. Their attack strings just got longer and longer until you had to parry like 10 hits every turn, or they would charge up their attacks for what felt like 10 minutes. Comedically long attack windups are definitely not unique to Expedition, but in action games you can often use that time to deal damage or reposition, maybe use an item or something, but in this game you are just sitting there, which kind of slowed down the pace of the combat to a point that I wasn't really enjoying it, because I was really just sitting there for ages until the enemy just randomly did 15 attacks within like 2 seconds. The menu UI also isn't the best in my opinion, but while I was expecting to get overwhelmed by all of the different passives and abilities, the game actually does a great job at pacing all of these different systems out, which made it a lot of fun to experiment and to slowly figure out my character build as I was playing through the game. The story was also really great. I especially love how it handled the greater narrative and mystery surrounding the painters and stuff. Out of everything in the game, this specific aspect of the story was definitely what hooked me the most, but it was also for that same reason that I cared less for the other parts of the story and world, or for the characters that weren't as involved in this side of the narrative. I didn't actively dislike anyone, but I didn't find myself too invested in CL or Lune, despite them being party members. Thankfully, I did really like Gustav though. Verso is also very based. Mael had an interesting journey, and I really liked that even the light-hearted characters weren't only used for jokes. Eskie and Monaco were both great. But if we're talking about great characters, I do have to mention the Goat Renoir, because he was my favorite by far. He literally stealed every single scene he was in. The structure of the open world was also another highlight for me, because something as simple as using an overworld map and having it change in small ways throughout the story added so much to the weight and scale of this journey. It's honestly insane to me how these inexperienced developers can absolutely nail this aspect of the game so perfectly in their first ever title, while some other more experienced developers are really fumbling the bag on that one. Now that I'm talking about the world, there's also some pretty great side content out there, but I wish that they incorporated more of it into the main story, especially in Act 3, because I felt like the later half of the story was kind of awkwardly paced, and they weren't really utilizing the full potential of this world in my opinion. So while it might not be a 10 out of 10 for me personally, while I wouldn't even put it in S tier to be honest, this is undeniably a great game, and I would say I'd recommend it, but this is like the biggest game of the year, so what's me recommending it gonna do? Top of A tier, very good game. Just didn't hit as hard as a lot of other games that I played this year. Next on the pile, we have the final Resident Evil game for this video, and thankfully, it is a good one. It is a really, really good one. It's Resident Evil 7. As a soft reboot, this game definitely took some getting used to. It's first person now, the action has basically completely been removed for a complete focus on horror, Ethan is a very different main character compared to our previous protagonists, and gone are all of the known factions like Umbrella, the BSAA, or even the classic zombies, even if they're not really a faction. And at first, it just felt really different, and it didn't really feel like the Resident Evil that I grew to love over all of those games. But after a couple more hours, it started to feel familiar as I got further into this gameplay loop, and by the time that credits rolled on the final DLC, it thankfully truly felt like the next step in the series. This game might not scream Resident Evil from the get-go, but it really understands the golden age of the franchise and it's molding that core into a new experience. There is a lot that this game does masterfully. The atmosphere is impeccable, the puzzles, item management, and exploration is really satisfying. It has memorable characters and villains, a unique setting, and some extremely tense moments. But there are also some things that didn't exactly click with me. I'm not really a fan of the enemies. They could tank a lot of hits and the game spawns them seemingly at random sometimes. Like, I used to really love it in Resident Evil 1 that I would clear out a zombie from a certain hallway and then I knew, okay, this hallway is safe, while in other hallways I would leave the zombie alive to save resources and I had like a path to get around them or whatever. But in this game there were a lot of times where I was 100% sure that I killed the enemy in this room, but then later when I went back there, that enemy was just back, which was kind of weird, just knowing how Resident Evil usually works. And the map also often felt too small to properly deal with them or avoid them. It's also a bit of a shame that the DLC almost feels mandatory. Like, the base game is basically just Ethan Winters wanders into a Resident Evil game, and it tells his story and it also ends there. It felt like they were kind of scared of connecting it to the larger Resident Evil world. Like they were kind of scared of the action that has kind of become a staple of the series, but everything that I was missing from the main game in those aspects was included in the DLC. There was an entire Chris chapter which actually concludes the narrative outside of Ethan's role, and it also connects it closer to the Resident Evil we know. So all in all, while I wasn't too fond of it at first, Resident Evil 7 honestly proved itself as the thing that we needed after 6. The base game brought the series back to its core and the DLC established its place in the greater universe. At this point, I was just ready for Resident Evil 8, which I sadly won't talk about in this video because I finished it as my first game of 2026. So subscribe and stick around for that one in 12 months. Actually, I don't know, I might make a Resident Evil video before Requiem comes out because I literally just caught up to the whole series and I want to talk more about it. But in terms of the tier list, I would say that Resident Evil 7 is a very, very strong game, but the flaws that I have of it should make it just shy of like the highest A tier. It's a high A tier though, just not the highest. Very good game, really liked it. And after that, I finally finished my replay of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I'm not really gonna talk about this one though. I just wanted to mention it because it is one of the games that I played in 2025, but I already talked about this game in my 2023 video, and this replay was literally just to record footage and to refresh my memory for the dedicated video that I'm working on right now. So I'm not gonna talk about this game again. It is good though. It is very good, even if some parts did drag on my replay. And with that, we're back to new releases, with the next game being Silent Hill F. I haven't played that many Silent Hill games before, I only really played the original 2 and the remake, but for me this game hits all the right notes. It was a deeply disturbing psychological horror that provided a really unique experience. On my first playthrough I was constantly questioning myself on which parts of the story are real and which parts are just the town playing tricks on me, and slowly putting together the pieces was an extremely satisfying process. This entire narrative is masterfully written around this intrigue. This narrative just has so many layers to it and it explores all of its themes perfectly through a fantastic cast. All of the characters are explored to great depth as the game uses their flaws and strengths to constantly make you question what their intentions are. It makes you question if you even really know them. The way that the story is built also really uses the medium of games to the fullest by having multiple playthroughs uncover more of the story. It's already worth a second run just on its own, so you can experience the whole game with the knowledge that you gained from your first ending, but New Game Plus and the changes that come with it really elevate this experience by adding more cutscenes, more journal notes, and multiple endings that expands the story depending on how you played. Your playstyle influencing your ending on the New Game Plus run is also something that I really like, as it's not just narrative choices, but it's far more intricate, far more immersive, as it beautifully ties the gameplay into the narrative experience. But while these replays are my favorite part of the game in terms of how the story is told, it's also kind of my biggest issue with it, because if you want to get the full story, you need to play through the game 4 times. Save scumming can help you a little bit, but as much as I encourage you to play through the game a second time, I don't think New Game Plus adds or changes enough to justify an entire playthrough. Personally, I just ended up playing through the game twice and then I watched the final endings on YouTube, which I do recommend because the true ending, the final ending, is genuinely perfect. But I really didn't want to play through this game 4 times, and I'm saying this as someone who enjoyed the gameplay. The atmosphere is top notch, the puzzles are really fun, the combat is also really fun, but it's also limiting in all the right ways that a survival horror game should be. I really loved Silent Hill F though, it is easily one of the best releases of 2025. Honestly, my only real issue is those replays, but this game is incredibly strong where it matters most. I want Silent Hill to be a haunting and disturbing psychological horror, and it 100% delivers on that. It also made me realize that I really need to play more games from this writer, Ryuki Shio7, because god, this man can write. I'm putting it in S tier, I think, there. And we're going from one new release to the next, because after Silent Hill F, I played Ghost of Yotei. This is a pretty classic open world style game, but while Ghost of Yotei might play it safe, it masters almost every aspect of this design, and it hits all of the right notes. The story here is very different from its prequel, Ghost of Tsushima, even down to what it means for the main character to be called the Ghost, and I really liked this redefining of that title. Atsu is a person who lost everything and only lives to exact revenge on those who killed her family. The people see her as an onryo, a ghost who returns to the world of the living in order to seek vengeance, and on her journey she always carries her shamisen, a memoir from her mother, a sword that was crafted by her father, and she's always followed by a wolf, symbolizing her ties to her brother but also her hunt. And this is what I love the most about this game. Every single thing carries some sort of meaning to Atsu's character or to her journey, and everything feels extremely coherent because of this. Even the side content, despite having a bunch of side quests and open world stuff to distract you, these side stories are all explorations of loss, regret, revenge, finding a new purpose, losing yourself, and moving forward. These stories and other side content are integrated incredibly well. It never feels like you're checking things off a list. Even within combat, everything carries so much meaning. Atsu is a mercenary who fights dirty with any weapon she can find. She wasn't trained to master any specific sort of weapon, she wasn't trained in the ways of honoring your enemy, she was trained simply by her determination to survive. And I love how this opens up the interaction with the open world, as you can camp anywhere you want in order to cook, craft ammo, and sleep through the night, which adds an extra layer of immersion as you're traveling through this vast world. Again, this game isn't necessarily treading new ground, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Ghost of Yotei does an incredible job at portraying the story of Atsu. It had a bunch of memorable characters and moments in both gameplay and story, and it just felt like a worthwhile next step in the franchise. So in terms of the tier list, I am gonna give this a pretty high A tier. Since it is still a pretty basic game, it doesn't stand out as much compared to like a Resident Evil or an Expedition. Oh my god, okay, the next game is a really fun one to talk about, because it is a semi-replay of one of my all-time favorites. It's The World Ends With You, the original DS version. As I said, this is kind of a semi-replay since I already played the Nintendo Switch Final Remix version, but this was my first time playing the original. And while the story is exactly one-to-one the same, the gameplay here was completely different. On Switch, I wasn't really a fan of the combat since in handheld mode it was basically just a mobile game, and in docked mode it was a weird motion control system. But on the DS, I really loved the combat system. It's a deep and interesting system where you're controlling the protagonist on the bottom screen with touch controls, and on the top top screen you're controlling your partner with button controls. Both characters are in active combat at the same time, each with unique movement systems, so you're basically participating in 2 combat scenarios at once. If that sounds chaotic, then you're absolutely right, but as you progress the story, you slowly start to get a feel for it, and at a certain point you'll just reach a flow state, where you're effortlessly chaining attacks together on both screens. It is a fantastic feeling. Especially because this also works in perfect harmony with the story. You play as Neku. He's basically a guy that doesn't want to talk to anyone, always wearing his headphones, and he's basically living in his own little world. But then he's forced to participate in the Reaper's game, where he has to partner up with a stranger in order to survive. The player trying to get used to controlling 2 characters at once is a perfect representation of Neku having to expand his horizons, open up to other people, and learn to work together. Throughout the game, you also get paired up with a few different partners, all of them having different gameplay mechanics, and that also represents Neku having to learn how to work with different people, as all of them have wildly different personalities. This keeps both the gameplay and the story fresh, and it gives Neku plenty of room to grow on his arc. All of these partner characters are explored to great depth, and the character writing is one of my favorite parts of this game, or just the series in general. Every single one of these characters and their relationships feel incredibly human. They have really fun dynamics, and all of them are just a joy to see interact on screen. The characters in this series are honestly some of my favorite characters that I've gotten to know in any game. But that's not the only thing to love here. The game has a banging OST, a beautiful art style, and an extremely intriguing mystery plotline where you're uncovering the truth behind this Reaper's game. You can also really feel how much passion the developers had for this game, as there are so many small and incredible details everywhere. And the setting, while it is just Shibuya, is so incredibly detailed and fleshed out that it basically becomes its own character. This replay also never stops reminding me of how brilliantly the story is written, as I was constantly noticing small little things which were setting up reveals that would only come into play many hours later. And I just love stuff like that. It made me appreciate this game so much more. This is yet another easy S tier for me, as it is just one of my favorite games of all time. I deeply love this game, I deeply love its characters, I love its gameplay, I love what it stands for, I love all of the emotional moments in it. This is truly a masterpiece, one of a kind. I've never played a game like this. Please check it out if you can. Next up is another game that I only have digitally because it is Undertale. Undertale is a game that I really loved watching playthroughs of in 2015, and I loved playing through it myself even more in 2025. This game is just so good. The characters are unbelievably charming, the story feels meaningful, the world is extremely fleshed out. Deltarune being a thing obviously adds to this, but even if it's just Undertale as Undertale, it's already quite engaging. It's got really funny and catchy writing, the combat is simple to understand but also endlessly creative and fun, the music goes incredibly hard, and I just really love this game. Usually I don't really enjoy these types of RPG Maker games. I don't know if this is actually an RPG Maker game or not, but you know what I mean. Even if the story in those are great, I often just get kind of bored, and they always have a lot of sections that I feel like I just have to push myself through, while here there was only one section which didn't really hit for me. Outside of that, this game was just so much fun. I'm going through this one a bit quicker because it's fucking Undertale. We all know its peak, and I don't have that much to add here. I'm just glad to have finally played it, and now I can delve into Deltarune. So in terms of the tier list, this is easily top of A for me, but I think it's just shy of S tier. Which is probably good because S tier is getting pretty stacked. And it looks like we're going from one indie game to the next, because the other indie game that I played is Little Goody Two Shoes. Sadly, I didn't enjoy this one too much. It left a really strong first impression, as I was really intrigued by the initial setup, and I love how dedicated this game is to its classic anime art style. I also found Elise to be a pretty entertaining and charming main character. Like, yeah, she's bratty and arrogant, but she's like the good type of bratty and arrogant. The game has a pretty fun resource management gameplay loop that paces the content, but in terms of the actual moment-to-moment gameplay, I wasn't really a fan of it. During the day you have a few activities that you can partake in. One of these takes the form of minigames, and there are only 4 of them, with 2 of them being okay and the other 2 being genuinely bad. At night you have to partake in these secret rituals which actually drive the plot forward, but these, while having some cool ideas, actually ended up up being pretty underwhelming as they often failed in their execution, either because the puzzles of these rituals are pretty inconsistent mechanically, or because they rely way too much on trial and error. Thankfully, the other daytime activity is pretty good though, as you can have these social link dates kind of thing with some other girls, and these characters are pretty fun and charming. Their stories are pretty good and they actually get you quite attached to the characters. It's just a bit sad that these characters aren't treated equally in terms of screen time, which feels like a fatal flaw for a game like this. And while these romances are the strongest part of the game, even they fall kinda flat in the end, as they don't really go anywhere meaningful. A lot of the game falls kinda flat, to be honest. Once I reached the conclusion, it became clear that the game was just kind of meandering into nothingness for a big chunk of it. The game also has multiple endings, but the endings where the romance takes center stage can only achieve that through ignoring literally every other plotline, which makes the whole plot lose impact, and the only ending that does feel like it leads somewhere is the canon ending. So I'm not sure why the game has these different options and these different endings if they're not willing to meaningfully conclude all of them. I still don't want to be too negative on this game though, because I did enjoy aspects of it. It is genuinely beautiful, it has a great OST, it's very charming, it has some interesting main characters, it has a cute romance, and it does have that interesting setup. It's honestly good enough to the point that I do want to play the next game, just to see where this story goes, but it doesn't really stand on its own for me. Or maybe the sequel gives it more meaning in retrospect. For now, I have no idea. I'm putting it in the bottom of C tier. After this is another game that I only own digitally, but not an indie game this time. It is Quantum Break. And the only reason that I played this is because it's a Remedy game, to be honest. Because at first glance, Quantum Break looks like a generic guy with gun and superpowers third-person shooter. But it turned out to be so much more, as Remedy games often turn out to be. It is a really interesting story that is told through both gameplay sections and live-action episodes that play in between each act. The gameplay sections are the main bulk of the game. Here you play as the main character who has to fix time, as time itself is broken, and all of the environments do a fantastic job at making it clear that time itself is falling apart, with the universe struggling to keep itself together as you're fighting through these areas. The gameplay itself is also pretty fun, especially in the larger set pieces, but while it is fun, it does get kind of repetitive near the end, since there aren't that many weapons and you unlock most of your powers very early on. But the story did keep me interested all the way through. In the gameplay sections, as I said, you follow the main character, but there are also these live-action TV episodes that continue the story through the POV of a bunch of side characters from the antagonistic faction, taking full advantage of this different medium to show their story and how they impact the world. It's a really weird concept, but it strangely works for me. The gameplay sections can keep a steady pace, while the TV episodes can slow down a bit and let the plot and characters breathe. There are even some very short junction chapters that take place in between the gameplay section and the live-action TV episodes that integrate player choice into this mix. And it's really awesome to see how these choices affect both the gameplay and the live-action sequences. I also really like how Remedy Studios is sort of tying together plot points from a Quantum Break into their new connected universe with Alan Wake and Control. It's done in a roundabout way since they don't own the license to Quantum Break, but I'm currently playing through Alan Wake 2, and whenever Tim Breaker or Mr. Door shows up, I feel like a madman connecting the dots between these two games. Something that did bother me about the presentation of the story, however, is the insane amount of notes and audio logs. These are way too long and contain extremely vital information. This information really should have just been properly integrated into the narrative itself, because without them you will be very lost. But in conclusion, this is just a classic Remedy game. It's flawed in many ways, it's far from their best work, but it also has so many great ideas and unique and experimental aspects to it that does make it stand out despite all of those flaws, especially through this multimedia format. I might be a bit biased because I just love time travel stories, but the core of the narrative did keep me engaged, and the characters were interesting with a fascinating larger world and lore. I think I would just put this at the bottom of B because it does have some pretty strong flaws. Okay, guys, next up, we have a game that I've talked about a lot on this channel. It's the 100th line, Lost Defense Academy. I wasn't sure if I should talk about this game again, because I already talked about it twice on my channel in dedicated videos. I talked about it on a collab video with my favorite games of 2025 with other creators, and I'm gonna talk about it again in another collab video, but I can't not talk about my new favorite game of all time now, can I? Like, it wouldn't feel right to just skip it, so let's just go over it really quickly. This is a visual novel tactical JRPG where 16 students are forced to fight in this war to defend this academy, because the academy holds the key to humanity's survival. You just need to defend this school for 100 days and the war is won. And this is one of the most unique gaming experiences that I've ever had. Over the course of these 100 days, the game will slowly hook you into its narrative, its characters and this world. It's kinda hard to talk about this game honestly, because this is truly a title where you should play it as blind as possible. It's filled with mysteries and plot twists, and everything is immaculately presented as the game lays out a trail of breadcrumbs that just makes you want to know more. It does an incredible job at exploring this war and the role that these characters have to play within it. And on top of all of that, it is also a genre-bending maze of a narrative, as the game has 100 story routes. It starts off, as any game does, as a linear story, but at a certain point you will unlock the game's true form, as you will get to make decisions at crucial moments, which will completely change the course of the story. It can become a horror game, it can become a classic anime story of friendship, or a murder mystery, or a killing game. It can even become a dating sim, or a comedy, or a combat challenge route. This game has everything, and I love it so dearly for how it is able to pull all of this off. The game even has a demo that is pretty long and gives you a perfect taste of this experience. I've been bothering my friends to play it all year. Please check it out. This is the best game that I've ever played. I love every single character, I love all of the plot points. Not every story route is perfect, obviously, as there are 100 of them, but there are so many good ones, and it's that whole package that just makes this game so special. I am adding a special tier for it, because that is what it deserves. It is the 100th line, Lost Defense Academy. Please check it out. We have reached the final game that I played in 2025, and it was a pretty strong note to end off on. It's the Indiana Jones game, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. This is just a really fun game, and it absolutely nails the vibe of the movies in every single aspect. From the characters and dialogue to the story and the adventure. But most importantly, this is also not just an Indiana Jones movie in game form, this story was truly made for a game, taking advantage of the longer runtime, varied locations, and the use of gameplay through explorable dungeons and action set pieces. The story takes you through many linear and story-driven locations, but it also has a few smaller scale open worlds to explore, each location being extremely detailed and filled with life, offering a different flavor of adventure and a bunch of side content. You have the smaller optional activities and puzzles that are actually really high quality, but there are also a bunch of side quests that tell a worthwhile story, complete with unique gameplay scenarios, even using these side stories to dig deeper into aspects of the characters that aren't explored very often. My biggest issue with this game is just how janky and unoptimized it is. Even now on the PS5 port, the game would regularly drop frames. The combat and NPCs are constantly bugging out. The enemy AI feels really dumb even on the hardest difficulty setting, to the point that I just thought that they were broken most of the time, and the game is just kind of a mess. Not enough to ruin the experience, but definitely enough to the point that I felt like I had to mention it. And that's a shame, because when everything works, the game feels really great to play. The combat is really fun, especially the hand-to-hand combat. I really liked that I was just able to pick up so many random objects that you find around in the environments to use as weapons, throwables, and guns. The stealth gives you a lot of options because of this, but also with the whip and the disguise system, climbing feels really deliberate, heavy, and responsive, which I really liked. And even in a world where we have games like Uncharted and Tomb Raider, this game still manages to feel unique and set itself apart in ways that run far deeper than its first-person POV. I just really enjoyed my time with this, and I really hope that this studio and this team can make more Indiana Jones games. They obviously know how to make a fantastic experience, they just need to iron out some of the jank. So in terms of the tier list, I think I'm gonna give this like a pretty high A rating despite the jank. But that was it, guys. That was every single game that I played in 2025 put into a nice tier list. But I'm not gonna talk for much longer because I've been recording for really long, and this video is probably also gonna be really long. So I hope you enjoyed this video. You know what, scratch that. I'm editing this video right now, and I understand that when I was recording it, I was like, oh, I've been talking for so long, I kind of just want to move on to the outro, but it would be kind of a shame to end this video without a proper conclusion, wouldn't it? So I am here to give this video the conclusion that it deserves. And looking back at this tier list, it was really just a fantastic year, wasn't it? It's a bit weird looking at it and seeing that I have so many games in S tier compared to like A or B tier, because usually, you know, you'd have S tier saved for like those 2 or 3 games that really stood out, but when I'm looking at this, there also isn't really a game that I want to bump down. Like, yeah, Devil Survivor Overclocked could maybe be like the top of A, but at that point I would be moving it down just for the sake of moving it down, and that's not really what the point of a tier list is it? Like, I put it in S tier because it is truly an S tier game for me, and I really loved it, and like, the same goes for all the other games. And I'm also thinking like, maybe my explanations and then the placement of where they end up in the tier list doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, I feel like I was kind of more positive about Quantum Break, only to then put it below Ace Attorney, which I talked a bit more negative about, I feel like. But stuff like that is mostly explained because, like, I have a lot higher expectations for something like an Ace Attorney compared to, like, a Quantum Break. So that's why I probably talked about one game a bit more negatively, and then I still ended up placing it higher than another game, just because, like, you know, expectations and stuff. But I feel like that's kind of the fun in the tier list. Like, I can give a lot of criticisms for one game, but you know what, even despite all of those criticisms, it is still an A tier, for example. You know what I mean? Like, that's just the fun of a tier list, seeing how they stack up against each other, seeing how my experiences are now that I'm looking back at them at the end of the year. This video was a lot of fun to make. I really liked that I added this tier list aspect to it, which I didn't do in my other videos, and I feel like it also kind of helps to show just how much I appreciated a certain game. But yeah, just looking back at this, it really was a fantastic year. It was a nice mix of like replays and new games, it was a nice mix of old releases, new releases, and it's such a nice mix of genres as well now that I think about it. Like, I always try to play different things and not stick to one genre, and this tier list I feel like really shows that, considering that I have stuff on here like Sonic and Pokemon and a Western RPG like The Witcher, but also have JRPGs like Expedition, and have visual novels like Ace Attorney, and shooters like Quantum Break, and I also have a bunch of horror games, because that's a genre that I have come to appreciate lately. I also feel like genuinely, if we're being for real, I wouldn't say that there was a single game in here that I would genuinely say I dislike, besides for Resident Evil 6, but even that game had like fun moments and positives, like the end of the Gris campaign, and like playing it in co-op with a friend was still a fun experience, even if the game itself isn't really that good, in my opinion. So yeah, I feel like that's most of the things that I wanted to get out. Gaming is something wonderful. It was a very, very fun year. This is just a fun tier list, a fun video. It was really nice to talk about these games, but I'm gonna hand it back to recording Archery, because believe it or not, I did record an outro at the time. Make sure to let me know in the comments what you think of my tier list, what you think is wrong. Also let me know what your favorite games were of 2025, any games that stood out to you, any recommendations. Also, talking about recommendations, if you haven't, please check out my 1K subscriber special announcement video and my thank you video for 2025. That's one video, by the way. But in that video, I asked to leave a comment for a game that I should play and review for my 1K special. Because all of the games from my tier list right now are awesome, but they're also games that I decided to play myself, and I thought that for the 1K special it would be fun to ask you guys what I should play. I'm doing a pretty shitty job at explaining it right now, but I explain it better in that other video, so I'll leave it in the description, just as I'm gonna leave all of the other videos in the description of the games that I have made reviews on already from this tier list. My brain is kind of mush because I've been talking for so long. My apologies if I'm not making sense. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you all have a great start to your 2026. I hope you all get to play a lot of banging games this year. And that's it. Thank you for watching. Leave a comment, leave a like, check out the channel if you haven't. I really appreciate all of the support. Thank you again for all of the support in 2025, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in the rest of 2026.